All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to TLMI's Platinum Sponsor Lunch and Learn, presented by UPM Raflatac. For the past 90 years, TLMI, a member-driven association valuing community, insight, and advocacy, has helped advance the tag, label, and packaging industry by providing opportunities for members to network and learn. Today, we continue in that tradition by hosting another Platinum Sponsor Lunch and Learn, presented by Ashley Drew and Kyle Strensky. Ashley, Kyle, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us today. So, hello, everyone, and good afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us this afternoon. My name is Ashley Drew, and I'm the Sustainability Manager for UPM Raflatac Americas region. So, I focus really closely with our commercial teams on commercializing our sustainable product portfolio and really work very closely with educating our customers and brands and helping them meet their sustainability goals. I also engage with many different associations and platforms, and in addition to TLMI, such as US Plastics Pack and Sustainable Packaging Coalition as well, to name a few. Kyle, over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Strensky, Business Director, Films and Specials Business Unit for the Americas. Since today's webinar is about sustainable solutions, I'd like to add that I've been involved with Raflatac's sustainable labeling solutions for years, lead the Americas F&S Climate Roadmap, and I'm on the APR, PET, and Olefins Technical Committees. Back to you, Ashley.
Awesome. So we've got a really exciting and very packed agenda this afternoon. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we plan to take you through, Kyle's going to go over a really brief intro into who UPM Raflatac Americas is and what our global presence looks like. And then we will get into some sustainability market drivers and really talk about, why is sustainability important to brands? And then kind of the meat of the presentation today, really the important piece that I'm excited to share with you is really how to start approaching with a more strategic perspective, those sustainable product conversations, really how to maximize our success with those sustainable solutions. And then we will hopefully have time at the end for some Q&A as well. There are also some polls sprinkled through the presentation just to keep you guys awake, hopefully, after lunch. And please feel free to engage in those. And we will go ahead and get started.
Great. And we have a lot to go over today. And as she mentioned, we will keep this section very brief about both UPM and Raflatac. UPM is a global company with sustainability at the core of its various businesses. As you can see here, these businesses include UPM Fiber, Energy, Plywood, Specialty Papers, Biorefining, Communication Papers, and of course, Raflatac. We have over 17,000 employees in 44 countries, servicing over 10,000 customers. As for Raflatac, again, a global supplier of innovative and more sustainable self-adhesive paper and film products with over 3,000 employees operating in 41 countries, 12 factories, building pressure-sensitive labeling solutions for 13 end-use segments. I believe now it's time for that first poll, Ashley.
All right. So to get everyone's brains warmed up back after lunch, we want to start off with a poll. So what comes to mind when you think of sustainability and labeling? And you can vote right on your screen through the Zoom poll right here. And we will give you a couple seconds to do that. And then we will hopefully get to see what you guys have chosen. So a couple options here: reduced environmental impact, focusing on CO2 reduction, recycled content, bio-based content, responsibility, transparency, credibility, circular economy, or all of the above. So we'll give you a few minutes, few seconds, not minutes, to fill this out. All right, are we getting some responses in there? Very cool. Okay. So many of you said all of the above, and congratulations. If you put a response in at all to this question, You're correct, because it's really any and all of the above. So thank you for participating in our first poll, just to get your brain warmed up and focused on the task. Sustainability really means something a little bit different to just about everyone. So we're going to get into really how to approach that conversation today. And we can close out of that poll and continue on our journey. All right. So we want to start off with some trends and market drivers, and really talk about why sustainability is so important. So as you can see, this is some data from a survey done by McKinsey and Company. 79% of consumers do say that sustainable packaging is a key part of their purchase decision, and therefore that's really one of the critical reasons that it's important to brands as well. Really focusing on their sustainability performance of their packaging. So thinking about things like switching to different materials that maybe have a reduced impact on the environment, maybe a reduced, thinner, lighter weight material, adding in recycled content, renewable, bio-based solutions in their packaging. So a lot of things can really fall under this, but because the consumers say it's important, that's one of the reasons why it's important to brands, among other reasons that we'll get into. But just to kind of ground us in really why that's important. And this really is, from the data that we've seen, going to continue to increase as we go forward. So some of the things, taking a bit of a macro perspective here for a second, some of the things that we really see as the market drivers really, really fueling the demand for sustainable labeling solutions in the industry. Number one is, of course, increasing resource constraints and climate issues. Maybe you've seen, recent IPCC reports painting a really dismal picture of our climate outlook. Maybe you've seen the data. I think we're all familiar with increasing resource constraints at this time. We've all seen many different supply chain disruptions the past couple of years, especially. So I think this is an issue that's very close to all of our hearts and all of our roles. And so that's really one of the big key pieces here. In addition to that, of course, global brand commitments. You see things like Ellen MacArthur commitments, UN Sustainable Development Goals. All of the really big household name brands are out there, have committed to these very public commitments coming due in 2025 and 2030 and so forth. So we really see that as a driver for really needing to increase the sustainability within the packaging space. Also, increased legislation. Of course, this is a really big topic. We're seeing things like in Europe, plastic taxation and carbon taxation come online. We're seeing things globally like extended producer responsibility legislation start to come online in more and more regions. And really, how is that going to affect the landscape? If you think of something, for example, like post-consumer recycled content, if this legislation continues to grow, how is that going to impact that supply chain? And how do we need to respond accordingly and make sure that our value chains are secured in making sure that we can access recycled content, making sure that we're really transitioning towards a smarter economy there. And legislation is one of the levers certainly used to push us towards those goals. And then from a little bit more of a micro perspective, what are some of the things that we're really seeing from our market that are trending and we're being asked about daily? Number one, really for the past several years, has been designing recycle-ready products. So this is a topic that's absolutely on the top of brands' minds as they're making sure that their packaging is the most sustainable that it can be. They really want to make sure that they're smartly designing for recyclability when that comes to be an important thing for the brands. Also, certification and transparency. We're seeing a lot in the space about credibility really being a heavy hitter here. And we really want to make sure we have that layer of certification and transparency, really because it's giving that claim out there on the market credibility. And that's going to become more and more important that we keep an eye on. Increasing demand for recycled content, like I mentioned in the previous slide, we really do see that landscape evolving. And so what does that mean for brands, for converters, for printers, for label material manufacturers like UPM Raflatac? So we're making sure that we're paying very close attention to these systemic levers and building that strategy into our value chains. And then also making data-driven decisions. So we're seeing this becoming more and more of an important piece to making packaging and certainly labeling decisions. So our consumers, our customers, brands really want to see what the data is behind the products that they're purchasing and that they're offering to their customers. So for example, we can talk about life cycle assessment, and we will do so briefly later on in the presentation. But this is one way that we can really help drive making data-driven decisions. We want to make sure that we're not offering solutions that just give, the warm and fuzzy feels. We really want to make sure that we have the data to back up that decision. And we're going to jump right into another poll here.
Yeah, so we already had one poll. Our second one up for today is, how often do your customers ask about sustainability? This is a single choice, so you've got never. They're starting to get curious. All the time, it's their main objective. So those are the three. Please take the time now and answer the poll.
Hopefully it's not never. All right. A couple more seconds here and we'll see what people have decided on. All right. So it seems like the winning answer here in responses is that they're starting to get curious, and that's a really hopeful thing to see. That's something that's really interesting. Never, there are a few of those, and then all the time there are certainly a few of those as well. So, but trending towards they're getting curious. They're starting to ask these questions. So that's really great to see. And we can close out of that. And then we're going to go straight into one more poll for now. So what is the biggest challenge you see when it comes to communicating about or having success with selling more sustainable labeling materials? So A, there isn't enough information available, or I don't feel comfortable with the value proposition. My customers are very price sensitive. There isn't enough material available, or the supply chains are too volatile, or I just don't know where to start. That's a valid answer as well. Couple more seconds here. All right, let's see what we've got. Okay, so my customers are very price sensitive being the leading response. Absolutely, we're seeing that as something that is always going to be critical to customers. Certainly, some say there isn't enough information available. That can certainly be true. I don't know where to start. So a little bit of a spread here. Great to see. Thank you for taking the time to answer that. So as we get back into the presentation here, really the reason for kind of gauging our level there is that we all aim to be a leader when it comes to sustainability. And as a leader, it's really important to make sure that we're meeting our customers where they are, because we're going to ultimately be helping to influence their journey ahead. So if you kind of think about it from this perspective, as you get more informed, over here to the left, we're just getting started, we're just getting curious, and then maybe, you're getting more informed, you're getting your foot in the door when it comes to sustainability. You've had a few projects under your belt, some success there, and then kind of sitting in the middle there, there's always going to be the crowd that's really more compliance driven or reactionary. more than anything. And then kind of if you think of the other end of the spectrum where we're getting more generative, this is really where, you know, sustainability is integrated into the business, and it's a really values-driven business, and we're actively making choices that, you know, measurably impact our results. So this is just a very high level snapshot of what that spectrum kind of looks like. So you can use this as a tool when having conversations with your customers, really to get an idea of where they sit along this spectrum, because everyone is really going to be at a different place in their journey. And the bottom line is that's okay. Um, Really the point is that we want to get started. So, you know, I like to think about this little analogy in that, you know, almost everything has a label on it at some point during its lifespan. So even making really small changes and adjustments, thinking about maybe lighter weighting to a thinner material, something simple, really can have a huge impact. So it's often the case that I see where customers, you know, they may not have a huge budget to do a lot of sustainability focused initiatives or projects, but really it's the small things that can be the most impactful sometimes. And really getting started can start really building that momentum there. So, when we talk about maximizing success with sustainable solutions and taking a little bit more of a strategic approach, keeping that kind of sliding scale in your mind, I think a lot of times, from what I've seen in conversations that I've had with our customers and with brands, is that sometimes we tend to overwhelm them with too much information, and that overwhelm tends to lead to inaction. And so that's what I've seen in my experience. And so my initiative today is really to start walking us through that conversation to help overcome that overwhelm and really start on the action piece. So oftentimes, you know, you may see this question as very familiar to you. It's certainly a question that I get almost every day and that our commercial teams get almost every day is a customer or a brand comes to us and asks us, "What sustainable products do you have?" Okay, so as a sustainability professional, I look at that as a really, really broad question. It's kind of the top of the funnel, if you will. And it's really our job as leaders to whittle it down to really what they're looking for, what are their goals, what's the functionality required, and how we can make the smartest recommendations for them. So that's how I like to kind of ground us here in this really broad question. And we're slowly going to go through a couple different steps that we can take as an approach to help those customers and brands overcome the overwhelm, take action, and really get to the heart of really what they're looking for that meets their goals. So the very first step that we really need to align on is functionality first. What are the functional needs of the package and label materials? And you may be saying, Ashley, that is really the most obvious question ever. Of course, that doesn't even need to be said, but unfortunately, it does. So aligning on functionality really is the very first kind of key critical piece that we need to make sure that we have very clear, because a lot of times there will be a lot of excitement generated when we're working with customers that are interested in more sustainable solutions, and that is absolutely wonderful. And sometimes in that excitement there can be some key pieces that are lost when it comes to functionality, so we might not keep that in mind when we're recommending products. And so that's really important that we do that. So the guiding principle here, what's the functional need of the packaging? And then, excuse me, we can leverage in other things from a sustainability perspective, whether that be recycled content, if they're looking to reduce their carbon footprint, if they're looking at different production performance indicators, cost, of course, as we all mentioned before in that poll, is always going to be a critical piece of things, and we all really need to make sure that we're balancing all of these different needs because these are all ultimately really important. So Packaging that's not doing its job is never sustainable. And like I said, that may be obvious, but if you think of a package of deli meat, or if you think of a bottle of wine, right, there is a product inside that package that took a lot of resources of time and money and natural resources like water to create in the first place, right? So if that product does not make it with integrity to the consumer, to its intended consumer, then all of those embedded resources within that material that we're trying to sell have been lost, right? And so what's the impact of that? So it's certainly not something that that we think about every day, but it's something that's really important to align on when designing a package that not only meets the functional needs, but also the sustainability needs as well. All right, so after we've aligned on really the first key piece of aligning on functionality, the second thing to get very clear on is what are the customers or the brand's goals that they're working towards. So if you think back to that really high level question of what sustainable products do you have? Before we want to just jump in and get excited with recommendations, which is something that we've all fallen prey to, we really want to align on what their goals are. So if they don't know their goals, really, we can't make the smartest recommendations for them, right? So what's important to the customer or brand, and do they have any types of driving initiatives like these over here to the right that Kyle will get into?
But yeah, here we've got, Walmart, Unilever, P&G, and Amazon on the screen. There are many more big and small brands out there that have sustainability goals, initiatives, what their packaging needs to be, what their corporation sustainability efforts are. A lot of these you can find out a lot more on their websites. But I just want to touch very briefly on these. Project Gigaton by Walmart. This is something that was created back in 2017 to engage suppliers in climate action, along with the NGOs and other stakeholders. The aim is to reduce or avoid 1 billion metric tons, which is a gigaton, of greenhouse gases from the global value chain by 2030. So that is not just do they have their private brand, but also brands that are then sold in Walmart, which is many. So this is their way of reaching out there. Unilever, this one's a little shorter here, that I've captured. Their purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. Amazon's aim is to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2024. P&G's Ambition 2030 supports their brand's ability to provide irresistible superiority that is sustainable to improve lives now and for generations to come. I didn't get into the details here of every part of their package, but when you're talking to the brands, or if they're on this webinar, what resonates with them, what does their package require, and we're going to go into that actually a little bit more into the next slide as we want to talk about some solutions in action. So here are some examples of brands using labels to make an impact. Many of us are quite aware that the label might be the lowest weight percent on many of these packages that you see there. But there's definitely an opportunity to improve on, whether it's recycled content, again, whether it's PCR or PCW, you've got your reduce, you've got everything else that we can entail in here. But when we look at the lower left, we've got Sweet Leaf, which was started using a PET bottle. They selected our pressure sensitive material with RW85C adhesive, which is designed to wash off a PET during the recycling process. This enables recyclers to maximize the yield of clear PET flake. PET is not the only type of package that can benefit from sustainable labels. In the upper left, we've got a glass wine bottle with a paper pressure sensitive label. However, this winery didn't want to just any type of paper label. They selected Envy, which is a wet strength product with 100% recycled paper, has shelf appeal, and a PET liner with 90% PCR. So in that case, they really ramped up, something with glass. They've got a paper label out there with a lot of recycled content, replacing the virgin fossil-based liner with 90%. And we'll do one more on here in the lower part on the right, Ocean Action. So here we go. We've got a brand that's all about ocean action labels. Zerati, which is a top Italian company in the fish industry that has been recognized for several of their sustainability efforts. As a next step in their fight against plastics in the sea, they started using Raflatac's Ocean Action label material on their tuna product line. This is a first of a kind label made with plastic waste collected within 200 meters of shorelines and 50 kilometers of the waterways. After collection, this plastic is recycled and given a new life. So these are just some of the examples of what a label can do. And depending on their goals, if it's CO2 reduction, if it's just plastic reduction, if it's virgin material reduction, these are different ways that brands can use their label to help achieve these goals. Back to you, Ashley.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. And just, going back to, the really big household brands, commit really public commitments for a second. If you see Amazon has a net zero goal, what kind of products should you be offering them? Does it make more sense to offer them, bio-based content or recycled content? All of these different things can weigh in when making those decisions, and it's really helpful to have these build out the right recommendations like Kyle mentioned. So these are all examples of awesome brands that have really taken these solutions into practice, and that they've aligned very closely with their sustainability goals, and they're helping them along their journey. So the third point here really is all about focusing on making opportunities actionable. So we just saw a bunch of really interesting examples of how brands and companies are taking these solutions and putting them into practice in real life. And it's really, really awesome to see those things, working in the industry and then seeing it on the shelf. And it's like, this actually happened, and it's real and tangible, and measurable results were achieved. So it's awesome to see that. We really want to make these opportunities actionable. Again, if we just throw the whole book about sustainability at a customer or a brand, it leads to overwhelms. Just want to reiterate that piece there. And how can we take that information to help us build a more strategic approach? So if we think about how to make these opportunities actionable, where are there opportunities that we might be able to choose alternatives? Can we further resource optimize something? Is there a material that the brand is currently using that we could reduce those resources even further by lightweighting or further resource optimization in another way? Can we reduce the carbon footprint? Is the recycled content part of their goals? Can we build that into their product recommendations? And then another big piece is, can we further increase compatibility? Taking it back to a few slides before where we talked about how designing recycle-ready products is one of the biggest topics that we're seeing from brands right now. Can we take a look at their package from a holistic perspective and really help them to enable that recyclability even further? Because you may or may not know, but the label is a huge impact on recyclability of that package in general. We often get asked, is this label material recyclable? And yes or no, but we have to take it from a little bit more of a holistic approach and look at the whole package, because the label material we recommend is going to change based on the main package component. And really the label and its compatibility can make or break the recyclability of that product. So other things on here, is there brand resonance with bio-based? Is there brand resonance with the recycled content similar to the Zerati brand in the previous slide? So these are all things that we need to pay attention to when building out really a roadmap for our customers on how we can make these opportunities translate into real life action. And just to give you kind of a high level of how we think about our sustainable product portfolio and how we guide our customers and brands along this journey as well. We have it structured in sort of a 4R approach here. starting from reduce, really this is where I think about things like thinner, lighter weight materials, but it's also a really low barrier to entry place to start out in sustainability. So if you're taking a strategic approach with your customers and they're maybe on the left-hand side of that sliding scale we looked at earlier, one of the best places to start really is looking at a reduced product. Maybe that's a thinner paper, a thinner film, a thinner liner even, or maybe even a reduced carbon footprint product if that falls within their values there. So that's often one of the best places to start along a sustainable labeling journey. And then we move over to recycled. So this is really where we're thinking about, does recycled content add to their goals? Is that something they're interested in? It's often one of the next best places to start. It's fairly widely available and comes in, different constructions, whether that be recycled content face material or liner or both, from 30 all the way up to 100%. So we can really hone in on what's important to the brand there as far as recycled content goes. And then renew, so the green R right here really is where we're thinking about completely moving away from fossils altogether. Our mission is to be the first label materials company to go beyond fossils. What does that mean? So one of the ways we work towards that is, building out our Renew product offering where we are, looking at products that are responsibly sourced and bio-based. And really have that credibility and transparency, such as one of our products called Forest Film, which we don't have time to get into in detail today, but really it's looking at responsibly sourced bio-based content that does not include fossil-based materials. So those materials are non-renewable, and we really want to focus on renewable bio-based materials here. And then over on the far right, we have our recycling and reuse category. So this is really where we're starting to think in more detail about how do we support the circular economy. Many of you called circular economy earlier in our poll one of the things you think about when you think of sustainability, and that's what we're doing exactly here in our sustainable product portfolio. And this includes things like making sure we are enabling that design for recyclability, so making really smart recommendations when it comes to compatible label materials with the main package. That's really, really critical. And it's also things like wash off adhesives that can make, really enabling that highest possible quality recyclate outcome really important there. And a couple ways, so I mentioned earlier, making data-driven decisions. So a couple of ways we also help from the services side rather than the product side, take these opportunities and make them into actionable pieces that our customers and brands can start working towards immediately. One of the ways that we help enable that is through this service that we call Label Life, which is our life cycle assessment service. And it's a really great tool to be able to leverage when making decisions from one product to another. So we can think of it, for example, a standard film material to a forest film material, for example, or, a more standard film or paper to a thinner, more lightweight film or paper. So this tool can really provide that high level, credible data to help us make that decision in a more informed way, and to provide this tool to provide this to our customers as a tool to do so. This can be modeled cradle to gate or cradle to grave. We have a lot of flexibility in this tool depending on what the goals of our customer is. And we can also model different end of life scenarios. So we can take a look at what it looks like for the product material to be recycled, landfilled, or incinerated. And that can really, provide us with some good information when planning what recommendations to make to our customers. And then they can have this as a tool to see physically, what does this look like in practice? So an example of that here and what the output of that tool looks like is for here, this is just a really quick example, a Raflatac 60-pound material transition to a Next Plus material, which is our reduced version with a reduced carbon footprint face here. And you can see a snapshot of what that looks like. So really the value proposition of transitioning in this product case is that we have a resource optimized face and liner. In addition to that, our Next Plus line is reduced carbon footprint, certified by the Carbon Trust. So you have that added layer of credibility, like we mentioned earlier. And then, of course, the FSC face and liner here. So this is just one tool that you can have in your toolbox to help build out the action piece. So we can make these product recommendations and then back it up with this data to help them make a really well-rounded, informed decision that meets their goals. And that really is the strategy piece here. And then in addition, on the services side as well, you know, if reducing waste is part of a goal that a customer or brand has, one example of how we work towards that with some of our customers and brands is through our Rafcycle liner recycling service. So it's a sustainable circular solution for many different brands. We're building this solution up in the Americas market now. It's a massive global program with over 500 customers at this point and counting globally. And it offers a cost neutral solution. We don't charge for the service. It's really just a way to make sure that we are handling that liner waste and getting it back into the value chain to be made into other materials through recycling. So this definitely adds brand and business value. And it's a pretty simple solution for the right type of customer that falls into the program requirements. So it's a really great way that we can leverage additional sustainability focused services to help our customers meet their goals as well in practice. So that can certainly be a key piece of strategic solutions that we offer our customers and brands. All right, and rounding this out with kind of the fourth and final step of our strategic approach to maximizing success with sustainable solutions. We've talked about leadership in a couple different slides now, and again, you are the sustainability leader, and it's your job to bring your customers along the journey with you, no matter where they fall along that spectrum, whether they're just getting started or they're more advanced and mature along their sustainability journey. And it's really important to leverage your resources. So leverage your resources such as education, like you're doing now by attending this webinar. Leverage your resources such as utilizing our Label Life tool to provide your customers and brands with really good data-driven decisions to help them change to more sustainable packaging material and labels. And then, you know, what are some of the folks in the industry doing, and how are they showing up as leaders in the space? Kyle, over to you.
Great. And this is a kind of a fun part for me because I get to go off on some tangents and capture some of the things that were already in polls earlier today, as well as this. I mean, you can see here that there are, you know, several of the converters out there that have these type of goals, what they're doing for sustainability commitments, and so forth. I mean, but what I want to ask you is, you know, how do you differentiate yourself? If you're a converter and you're on here, you know, how do you differentiate yourself from the competition? We saw in one of the earlier polls about customers, you know, how often are customers asking you about sustainability? And some, you know, thanks for the honesty, said never. Well, I'd like to know then, well, if they're not, how often are you talking to them about sustainability? Because you've also captured in this presentation, you've heard EPR, these type of bills that are being suggested in many of the states that can have fees tied to packaging. For the most part, the large brands we discussed have big teams and talk about sustainability and educate on recycling, on package. But even they, at times, you know, need some assistance and further education. But there are a lot of brands out there that come directly to the converter for the solution. And they don't understand what makes their package detrimental with a label or a specific adhesive, certain inks, metallics, whatever it might be. So where will that responsibility lie in the future? If legislation is asking for a product and package to be 100% recyclable, meaning that it, the plastic for the most part can go through the system without causing problems to others. So those are those things I want to kind of throw back out. You got myself and Ashley and others who are happy to help with this education. But one more thing is price. That came up in another poll. And yes, that's been a big one for as long as I can remember. Everybody wants sustainable, but they don't want to pay for it. It has been kicked around many times. But you saw in those 4 R's. And now if there's a potential of a negative impact of fees by not having something that is recyclable, using that term out today. But when we look at price, being sustainable doesn't mean that it has to absolutely cost more. If you look at the holistic package and the label, liner thickness, face thickness, performance, everything, can you switch to something that's thinner and add recycled content? Add bio-based if that's what the consumer, if that's what the brand, if that's what they want. These aren't one size fits all for the brands. You have to understand what they want. They might not even know, again, if they're a smaller company coming to you. So I just want you to keep that mindset open. If we learned anything over the last several years, we have to be able to pivot and be flexible as quick as anything, and have that mindset that, yes, some labels run on the line today, and they say they don't want to move to something thinner or go to a PT liner. So I just kind of throw that out there. Please keep an open mindset and kind of push that down. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. And always the cost conversation comes up, and really it's about merging, the value and cost. So we can really build a strong case for the value piece, especially utilizing those tools like we mentioned with the label life data, really to start building a very strong business case there as well. All right, so this is, some of the things that some of the key players in the industry are doing as far as sustainability leadership. We are certainly among them as well, and we are well on our way. I mentioned earlier that our ambition at UPM Raflatac is really to be the first label materials company to go beyond fossils. These are just a very small sampling of what our commitments by 2030 are. And we are very close and well on our way to achieving these targets. And they're not easy targets to achieve, right? We all have, or many of us have similar commitments out there, and they're tricky challenges that we're all working towards. But the more that we can really increase market adoption of the more sustainable alternatives out there in the market, the more impact that we make as a collective packaging and labeling industry. So that's what we're working towards. And before we wrap up with our last poll, we are really wanted to share some interesting market insight from what we're seeing from our customer base and our industry within our market, and what are we learning. So we track the data that we get from our customers and brands and from our sales teams. What are our customers asking about? So what are we seeing as the big topics? Number one, as I'm sure comes to as no surprise to anyone here, is of course recycling and recyclability. So again, just harkening back to that slide from earlier, recyclability, designing for recyclability is the number one topic that we are seeing from our market, certainly. And additionally, kind of the biggest piece of the other that you don't see broken out here has to do with questionnaires and legislative support, and FSC certified different certified materials like ISCC, FSC, PEFC, things like that. But in that other category, we're also seeing an increase in requests for CDP data reporting, EcoVadis reporting. So Scope 3 data sharing amongst throughout the value chain there. So that's a really interesting piece that we're seeing, and it goes back and really solidifies that solid line between, legislation being a huge lever and market driver to where we're going. Additionally, you can see a big chunk of what we're seeing from our market. It has to do with LCA questions and LCA calculations. So again, data is becoming king here. It's becoming a really critical piece that brands and customers of ours are really focusing on in order to make the right recommendations to their customers and the right decisions when switching from one label material to another. So I want to leave you with this before we wrap up, but just wanted to share what we're learning from our market. Maybe it helps you as you go forward. We certainly take this data very seriously, and it's a key piece of our business strategy and the types of products that we're developing to put out there on the market, because ultimately we want to be providing solutions to our market that really meets their needs and helps them achieve their goals. All right, and our final poll of the day. Thank you for bearing with us through all of these polls. We appreciate your engagement. How often does your sales team receive training on sustainable solutions and trends? Never, sometimes. It's a big priority with regular training on various sustainability topics and products. So this is just giving us some insight on how often you guys receive training, and maybe, how we can partner together to increase the education there. So I'll give you a few more seconds to answer that. All right, where are we at? Sometimes is the biggest category. Okay, that's great. At least it's not everyone in the never category. So it looks like there's still room for improvement on education, which of course there is. It's the biggest piece to really making a difference when it comes to sustainability. We really focus on education at UPM Raflatac. That's almost all of what I do in my role. So if there are topics that you're unsure of or you want to partner on creating education for your sales teams, please reach out to us. We'd love to be a collaborator in that, and really just helping the industry move forward as a whole. And then I think we have a few minutes for questions. So if there has been any questions that came through, I see a few things in the chat and the Q&A. Maybe we can take a look at
Yeah,
those.
and I see those. The first one, it goes back to the beginning when you were talking about trends, Ashley. So how does UPM rank the three in order of importance? And thankfully, Brian here listed it: resource constraints, brand commitments, and policies / legislation.
That's a really good question. I don't know that we really put a hard and fast ranking on it. If I were to speculate on that, I would say that probably climate issues are the biggest piece, because it really affects, the planet that we all have to live on. But I think they're all equally important. Certainly the legislative piece is critical to keep an eye on, because it's really going to be a driving force there, and could potentially have a lot of financial implications if companies don't comply. So I wouldn't necessarily give them a ranking, but I would say that, in general, I think resource constraints and climate issues probably top the list there.
Okay, and there was a very specific question that I went and answered directly to them. And then now we've got, see if you might have any insight. This is neither of us have maybe necessarily the answer to this, but I'll let you give it a try, Ashley. Is Rafcycle cost neutral for all liners or only specific label types?
I'm not sure what you mean by specific label types, but we do offer it right now as a cost neutral solution. It has to do with where the liner is generated, which is typically at the brand, right? So we're a bit further up the value chain. So the program works best when we have collaboration with our customer, which is typically the printer or the converter, right? And they further value sell that program down to their customer, which is the brand. We can accept paper and PET liners, which are the most common, I would say, liner types. So I'm not sure if that was the question, or if you want to elaborate further on what you mean by label material or face material.
And I see one here for for basically, I think it's going to you, Jack. That was in the chat function here about how can we get a copy of this presentation.
Yes, so keep an eye on your emails. We'll send out a link so you can get a copy. This is being recorded, so we will send out the recording so you can get the copy.
All right. Any other questions? It looks like I see, let's see.
Have I missed any that's in either the chat or the Q&A?
While Kyle takes a final look, I just want to thank you guys all for attending our session today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Kyle and or myself. And we're happy to take those and chat with you further there. But really appreciate your time this afternoon. Hopefully this is a helpful tool for you to use when beginning to have that conversation with your customers and give you kind of a quick and easy 4-step approach to really the most critical pieces to align on when making more sustainable product recommendations going forward for your customers.
Absolutely, and thank you, Ashley and Kevin and UPM. I mean, this was awesome. Thank you for hosting and supporting TLMI today. If anybody else on the call is interested in how your company can get involved with TLMI or how to host your own lunch and learn, please contact TLMI's engagement director, Dale Coates. That is at dale.coates@tlmi.com. We hope everyone had fun today. I mean, I certainly did. I learned a lot. And it looks like everybody else did too. So truly thank you. Ashley, Kyle, and Stephen, I know you're on the line. You helped set all this up. So thank you, Stephen, too. Yeah, if there's no other questions, right, I think we're good. I know, Kyle, we're hoping to email a few people. So if you have any questions, this is your last shot. Please let us know.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that looks like it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.